All right, good morning, everybody. We bring you another day for the 2020 Northern Arizona Indigenous Youth Suicide Prevention Conference. We do have DrTommyBegay presenting this morning on sacred wisdom, the path to hope, balance, and Indigenous resilience. As you heard yesterday, he is a clinical assistant professor in the Department of Psychiatry, College of Medicine at the University of Arizona. And we're very honored that he's been able to share his keynote address as well as the two presentations that he has provided to all of us. DrTommyBegay, thank you so much.
Good morning. It's an honor to be here. I am a Yate. I am of the Hashklishni clan, the mud clan of the Dene. The Bitterwater clan. My paternal clan is the Bitterwater clan of Torticini. I'm originally from the Window Rock, Fort Defiance sawmill area. I grew up on the Navajo Nation in that part of the world, and I'm very, very grateful for the experiences and the opportunities that I've had in my life. And today I want to focus. Yesterday I discussed. We went on this journey. We explored the more contemporary outcome of historical trauma, and I think it's important for us to understand, especially our youth, and especially in relating some of the issues today that are associated with what brings us to this conference. And there isn't a linear transition of events or activities that lend to detrimental outcomes. Instead, there are overlaps of issues, but ultimately we look at development. As a cultural psychologist, I focus on development, on looking at how something, whether that's an individual or a culture or even an item like a tree, how did it become what it is today? There is a story, an underlying story. We have deep roots to our lineages, to our relatives, our ancestors, and we are also spiritual beings, social beings. And having said that, we survive through adaptations, and those adaptations we acquire from those that have taken this journey before us, whether that might be a caregiver, whether that might be the stories that are healers and are those that have gone before us have taken. And so we learn from these stories. For the net, we are introduced to the underworlds in our creation stories, and the importance of the roles that different animals and different beings played in the net, first man and first woman coming to this more contemporary world. The power of coyote, the power of the water monsters, and also the relationship of how we see our mother Earth, and how we refer to her through these stories, through these our lineage as Changing Woman, and how Changing Woman had the warrior twins, had her children. The warrior is a really important concept to me, and how the warrior twins ventured to their father, the sun, to acquire the weapons to deal with some of the monsters here on Earth. And there are there are certain because of natural order and balance, there are certain things that the warrior twins were not allowed to eliminate. And so we're talking about, the impact of age, the impact of disease. And so there's a delicate balance that I think is incorporated into this concept of sacred wisdom, that I think that we wherever we may come from, we have our connections to our creation, to our path to a more contemporary time and a contemporary lifestyle. So I want to take this moment, or this hour that I have this morning, to sort of look at the utilizing that path as an asset. And what I mean by asset is using it as a tool to begin to see how the more physiological processes, especially in relation to the brain and in relation to motivation, the relation to taking action, the relation to empowerment, how that is tied to these traditional outlooks, these traditional ways. And again, as I emphasized yesterday, it's a psychology. What I mean by a psychology is that this is a way we choose. We have many choices. This is a way we choose to look at the world, to look at our responsibility, to look at our place in terms of the actions that lay before us, the opportunities that lay before us, whether that's to utilize this psychology to practice, to engage in activities that are surrounded by love. That's or perhaps we engage in utilizing science. It all comes together. And what I just basically described is how I see, my role and my responsibility in this quasi yin yang fashion. Yin yang meaning there's black and there's white, and there's a fluctuation between total blackness and total whiteness. And so life is about, in ya, is all about the fluctuation. Sometimes it's good, very good. Sometimes it's bad. Sometimes it's really bad. What is my responsibility in connecting and utilizing sacred wisdom to get motivation, to be a part of the goodness, be a part of the light and the warmth that will overcome the dark and the coldness. And the dark and the coldness I'm using in association to death, in association to no more life. So the light and the warmth, and however we connect with our universal place, with our philosophies, with, again, our psychologies, because our psychologies are based upon what we believe in. If we believe in a greater organization in the universe, in the world, in terms of our responsibilities, we will act upon that. If we believe that there is no such force, we will also act upon it. But it's a choice that we have, and that choice is what I'm referring to as empowerment. Empowerment is a choice to take action. So I want to spend this hour again reflecting upon sacred wisdom. And it's that relationship we have with the universe and the earth. It aligns universe, an individual, the mind, the body, with the earth. It defines us as sacred entities in the human form. For the Navajo, we refer to this relationship as Hajon, or Hajon Je. Je is that the interpretation in English is the way. So it is a psychology. If we believe in this way, we are going to act on that belief system. But it's the power of the universe through the holy people and the grounding of our Mother Earth as represented by Changing Woman. So this balance transcends into every individual that carries forth this belief. It's the alignment of mind, body, and behavior. Sa'anayeh b'kajon, which translates as in old age walking, I will go on this beautiful path, or simply to walk in beauty. Paraphrase to me that I will be at peace. I will be at that place of contentment, not hunky-dory goodness and happiness or depression, and sort of a more negative ways of acting, but I will be in content. I will adapt and move forward in a good way wherever I may be. And so that's the beautiful path that this philosophy is grounded in. So it's really sort of again the paraphrase, to be at peace and to act out, in all circumstances, regardless of our social and physical and environmental circumstances. As a person that studies behavior, as a cultural psychologist, I see this as a pathway. What I believe soon becomes what I think. The results in eventually what I will act upon, what I will do. So that's, again, if there's anything I leave with you, it's really sort of the relationship of belief, and what that translates into constant thinking. But that constant thinking we will act upon. Over time, we refer to this as behavior collectively, and behavior soon translates into more individual circumstances, such as personality. Our personality consists of how we react and how we respond to external circumstances. And even with our relatives, the Lakota medicine wheel tradition, there are 4 colors that are interconnected in unity in the sacred circle: the yellow, the red, the black, and the white. Each of the colors also represents the people on this planet. The yellow race, the red race, the black race, the white race, all connected in unity in a sacred circle. Each race also bears a responsibility. The red race, the indigenous people, hold the responsibility of being caretakers of this planet, be caretakers of our mother, our mother changing woman, and the relationship also with acting out on behalf of our mother, just as her children, the warrior twins, did, in terms of overcoming some of the obstacles, some of the issues, some of the so-called monsters that exist today, such as trauma, such as violence, such as addiction and substance abuse. That, I believe, is what brings each of us to this conference, to really begin to untangle this idea or this concept and this actual issue of suicide ideation. When we partake in the sweat lodge ceremony, we return to the womb of Mother Earth for nurturance, guidance. We sing, we pray, and we release the toxins that exist in our thinking, that exist in our bodies, that exist in how we relate or how we have related to more contemporary issues. And I'm talking about anger. I'm talking about unresolved pain and unresolved issues that we all encounter. This is when we go to ceremony, when we go to sweat lodge, these are opportunities to begin to heal. But this also comes with a belief system in the utilization of the universe. And so we refer to this as a purification process, the removal of toxins as emotions and as thoughts. And we replace that with prayers, a relationship of our responsibilities to Earth as we are in ceremony, as we're in the womb of Mother Earth of Sweat Lodge, and how that relates to our Father, the Sun, how that relates to also the universal relationship and the universal interactions. But really sort of more importantly, it provides a self-love. It provides also that energy, that universal energy that we all spiritual philosophies, the intent is to tap into love. The intent is to tap into utilize love as courage, to utilize love as empathy, to utilize love as a means to move through the conflicts and the challenges that life presents. And is also, demonstrated as service, as providing and helping, guiding those that are less fortunate, or perhaps even children, to help teach children the important aspects of existence. So in ceremony, the guiding power of the universe provides, as we referred to, the force of, in many ways, the many ways that we connect with this universal energy. You might refer to it as creator or the holy ones. It's an organization of the universe and how we fit in. And in spiritual philosophies, this is really sort of the essence of human perfection, or what I call human integrity. The best of what human behaviors are. That's really what these belief systems provide for us. Will we ever achieve that? No, we are not. As human beings, we are not perfect. But we have the opportunity to come from darkness to the light. We have the opportunity to change our behaviors utilizing a psychology, utilizing a belief system that allows the goodness of love to dictate our behavior, especially as courage, especially as empathy, especially as compassion, especially as acting out on behalf of, again, the people, on behalf of the service, the opportunities that we have. So in indigenous traditions, this is our worldview. This is how we see our place. So there are many challenges that have occurred that really have interfered with the continuation of this belief system. And those I attribute to the impact of historical trauma, the impact of a new way of acting that's really based upon what trauma has done to us. It has changed our behaviors. There's also an influx of I won't say contamination, but I'll just say it's different than this service outlook. And we might refer to that as capitalism. And there's nothing wrong with capitalism, except that sometimes we become more, we become selfish, and we want all of this. We want all the money. We want all the resources for ourselves or for our group. And so that creates the conflict and the tendency we shift from service to looking at acquiring these goods. So that's the benefit of this psychology. That's the benefit of beginning to utilize a new way of thinking in our educational systems, in our the way we deal with science, the way we deal with economic development. It's unique to a worldview of the indigenous. It's unique to the way we have learned and practiced, but it's been outside forces of historical trauma and other mechanisms of the dominant society that's really sort of disrupted and often, and what I see today, augmented our culture to the point where we are now living off of intergenerational maladaptive behavior. So I want to interrelate what changes in the brain, what changes in the body, what we refer to as health and wellness, and also the health disparities that are associated or come as a result of historical trauma or the result of moving away from the balance of sacred wisdom, how this really affects our sympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight mechanism, as opposed to the healing qualities of this tradition of indigenous philosophy, and that is of the parasympathetic nervous system, that place of peace, that place of prayer, that place of ceremony. And we could even use metaphors or analogies or symbols of masculinity and more feminine qualities and look for the balance. And every human being should carry this balance of masculine and feminine. There are times when we are children when we will act on a less aggressive basis, but there are times when we all need to be assertive and sometimes even aggressive in terms of fighting for our sacred ways. Can you mute yourself, please? Thank you. So that's sort of the areas that I want to touch upon. And as I explained yesterday, I'm a cultural psychologist. I'm and again, really what that means is all activities have a neurophysiological consequence. The brain changes based upon the activities that we engage in. And so I'm going to move through this introduction because I've done it a couple of times yesterday. But I'm also a psychosocial, educator, a psychosocial lecturer, and I work with various entities and groups here in the Tucson area and also in the Southwest, as well as reaching out into other points of the country, of the United States. I worked with a group in Nebraska a couple of weeks ago, and so that's really sort of the impact of cultural psychology and also of psychosocial health education. But my focus is as I've talked about yesterday, and I will talk about today, is really sort of this concept or this notion of toxic stress, and how for children and their development, childhood development, the consequences of excessive and chronic stress in the forms of abuse, in the forms of neglect, really begin to change the way their brain comes together, and as a result of that, affects their behavior and also affects their biological systems. The immune system gets affected to the point of pushing off or attacking pathogens or outside invaders such as bacteria and viruses. Our immune system changes to the point where we increase inflammation, especially. We increase these detrimental impacts to the body. And this is all related to, again, what stress, chronic stress, what childhood development stress, what we refer to as adverse childhood experiences, lends to. And so, again, I want to emphasize that what we do, what we receive, our cultures, what we get from the environment socially and physically affect our biology. And also the importance of mind and how we can just think about things. And again, this is the emphasis of a psychology. How we think about things, how we believe things really also changes our body. I'm thinking more specifically of what happens when we're optimistic, when we believe in the positive, when we believe we can make a change, as opposed to being pessimistic, like there's no hope, it'll never change, why should I even try? It aligns certain biological processes that soon manifests in terms of behavior. So that's again a very important concept. But ultimately, the environmental stress, and I really want to focus on the toxic stress, changes the brain, which also changes how we think, the mind, and also affects the body as far as disease processes are concerned. But ultimately, it's behavior, that how we adapt to those external or those environmental issues that really sort of is at stake. We see behavior without really taking into consideration what is the thinking processes. But it's more than just a thinking process. It's more than just synchese. Maybe we don't have the neurotransmitters. Maybe we don't have the physical structures in our brain to allow for certain thoughts to come that really are impacted because of chronic stress or because of environmental stress. And again, the two areas that I really focus on, again, are adverse childhood stress, but also, as I'm talking about today, is really what can we do about healing and resilience, and looking at more indigenous perspectives, indigenous ways of accomplishing that. And so, I've always, in every presentation I give, I really want to, connect with where this thinking process begins. This is not something I got from the university. This is not something I got from a textbook in high school or any other textbook I've been exposed to. These issues reside from where I come from. Shamasana, yeah, Bat Sosi, my great grandmother, and also the people, the healers in my life that have really sort of left something with me that I can use I can utilize science to also take further. So I really want to emphasize that. It's almost like looking at the analogy of a coin. There's two sides to the coin. There's the negative or the deficits, but there's also this rich asset, this rich way to connect with healing. And it's up to me, my imagination, to begin to look at ways of utilizing these concepts in a more healthy, in a more impactful way, as opposed to saying, well, that only works in this one area. It's limited. There are various research terms for that, and so I want to expand that and begin to open up, the possibilities of utilizing this psychology, this philosophy in areas that it's not necessarily, we're not used to seeing and thinking and talking and acting upon, this type of, or this way of being. And so, as I mentioned before, and this is a slide that some of you yesterday that saw my presentations, ultimately we see on the right side is really what brings us to healthcare facilities, psychiatric facilities, or even seeking some type of substance abuse rehabilitation. But really there's a story as we move to the left and we really begin to look at the impact of historical trauma, creating the cultural changes. But those cultural changes are really the lend to or lead to possibly chronic stress. And I say possibly because with biology, there's nothing that's black and white. There are different facets. There are different factors that are involved in terms of outcomes. And I have to emphasize that because we have different buffers, and buffer means that the negativity gets absorbed by some of these buffers or some of these issues. And so from a biological basis, this is really sort of how I understand the disease processes as well as the psychiatric outcomes of chronic stress or what happens to children. And I've shown this slide twice now, so I'm going to just breeze through it. But I want to focus on the bottom, the yellow aspects of problem, with what comes with overstimulation of our sympathetic nervous system. That fight or flight mechanism is really what's referred to as hyperarousal and hypervigilance, that has a tendency, is associated or linked with anger and violence. We're a little bit more, angry, or just we get agitated easily, but it's not because we choose to do so. A lot has to do with what our nervous system, what's happening to our nervous system that plays out in behavior. Just as with the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, this is the image of the middle image or cartoon really sort of shows how, in the brain, because of stress, because of fear and pain, how this process gets overstimulated. The analogy I use is like a rubber band or elastic. It stretches out, but it comes back. Those are normal. That's a normal situation. Just like, the natural order, something that goes up comes back down. That's the way our body system, our biology is arranged. But if it's overstimulated, it gets stuck. Just like an elastic, if we stretch it too much, it stays. It doesn't come back. It doesn't. It doesn't revert back to the original structure or composure. That's the same thing that happens with the body, but these processes lend to disease of inflammation. Pro-inflammatory cytokines are associated with inflammation and diseases of the heart or even stroke. But the autonomic nervous system, or that fight or flight mechanism, and being angry, and also being being associated to violence, there's a chance that we could take that that anger can be uncontrollable, and we could we might get arrested for hitting or acting out on our behavior, on our anger, actually, or with our anger. And so, what people engage in to squelch that process is really what lends to, self-medication with substances, with alcohol, with sex, with food, you name it, to really sort of begin to numb out from feeling that. And so this is a way busy slide. I talked a little bit about this yesterday, but the areas that I'm really interested in is looking at the impact of chronic stress on sleep, but also together stress and poor sleep lend to what's referred to as cardiometabolic diseases. As I mentioned, diseases that are related to inflammation, but also the fight or flight mechanism, the release of blood glucose. Too much blood glucose interferes with insulin and insulin's ability to take in that blood glucose to utilize as energy, and it creates basically diabetes, issues of diabetes. And with that, there's an association with other issues that impact our health. And so this is really sort of just a depiction of health disparities. I've talked about this, yesterday in both of my presentations. But I want to transition into, again, the philosophy of Hajon, or more specifically, Hajon, that concept, as I mentioned, during the first slide, my introduction of that everlasting and beautiful living. It's a psychology. It's a way I choose to look at the world. It's the way I choose to respond to the challenges of life. When I get cut off in traffic, do I reach under my seat and pull out my gun, or do I flip somebody off and cuss them out? Or do I say, you know what? It's not worth my effort. It's not worth jacking up my stress response system because somebody either inadvertently, or maybe they're late, but it's their business. But if we choose to engage, their business becomes our business. So this is, again, a way of looking at events that happen in the world. And so I revert that back to, the choice of remaining calm, but remaining calm is also associated with our nervous system, with our sympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight mechanism versus that peaceful place. But it's my interpretation. We don't know why somebody does what they do. That's their business. But what we do have control of is how we choose to respond to that. And as I mentioned yesterday, that the importance of Tatatin, the representation of peace, the representation of the sacred, the representation of love, but also, it's not a passive process. There's also the arrowhead. There's also taking a stand and fighting. But we don't fight with a weapon. We don't fight with our fists. We can begin to think of ways, Sinkese, think about what we can do in an appropriate way, whether that's a resolution. Instead of acting out on anger, we can channel this energy, we can channel this emotion to drive us to really look at, how can we break an issue down and analyze this so we can look for real solutions instead of just allowing our emotion. And that also is a habitual process. It becomes a habit. There's a part of the brain, as I'll get to later on today, that's called the basal ganglia. It's our autopilot. It's how, we're mindful. It's like riding a bike. How we have to focus when we ride a bike, we're all wiggly and we crash and burn. We scrape up our knees and our elbows. But after a while, everything comes together. All the nerves, all the parts of the brain, the cerebellum and other cortical areas, and come together with the muscles, and pretty soon we balance ourselves. We're riding the bike. And so that's really sort of an area of the basal ganglia in terms of, if I stopped riding a bike for 10 or 15 years, I already have the mechanisms available that help allow all the structures of my brain that's connected to the muscles to begin to ride that bike again. I might be wobbly at first, but I can ride. There was a time as an athlete at Window Rock High School where I used to shoot 1,000 free throws every morning. Again, what we refer to as that muscle memory. You do things over and over again, so it just becomes so much a part of you. That's part of that basal ganglia. So there's no reason to think that, what you believe in and what you think about is not also going to affect your behavior. So that's again, I talked a little bit more in detail about, the philosophy in terms of everyday living. So I'm gonna move forward, but ultimately, as this image depicts, the blessing way is really sort of the cornstalk, the center, in our relationship to the more perfect beings of the holy ones, the holy people, and our utilization of this way of thinking is a connection to that. But we will never be perfect. We will never, we will never achieve that state. But it's a way of sort of bouncing back from a darkness or from a period of life to light, to warmth, to making positive changes in our lives, but also in the world. So I always show this image of my great grandmother. She was a Navajo healer. She taught me this way of looking at natural order and also the essence of sacred wisdom. And there's a picture of me and my cousin when we're heck, I don't even know how old I was, but a little guy anyway. And also, when we talk about this walking and exercise and utilizing peace, I think about, my uncle. He was a Navajo code talker. He was a Marine, but he was very peaceful. He was a very gentle man. And he also acted and exercised on, this belief system, this psychology. So I always show these pictures of my relatives. But really, again, as I mentioned in the intro, our healing system, and specifically our healers, Hatasis, it's an alignment of what we believe in the universe, but also affects what we think about, and what we think about affects our body, and really what we decide to do, our behavior, to really exercise the, taking care of our mother, taking care of changing woman, in our responsibilities as sacred human beings. We're also social beings. And so having said that, we also incorporate, the ideology or the thoughts of the importance of the feminine energy, the importance of the female in giving life, the importance of also motherhood, and how, the unconditional love. When we go to Sweat Lodge and we seek a healing, we connect with our pain, and we sing prayer songs, and we release that pain so to our mother Earth in the womb as we return back to Sweat Lodge. Just as an example, I'm not saying this only happens in Sweat Lodge, but this can also be a psychology. As I deal with my grandchildren, as I deal with my children, there's a connection, a feminine connection, as opposed to a more masculine one that might drive my children away from me. There is an embracement that sometimes, because of the dominant culture, we think we have to be this macho, masculine, knucklehead, as opposed to really connecting and loving those that are around us, loving our Mother Earth, loving our children, and taking care of our children in a good way, in a nice way, as opposed to hitting and yelling and forcing people to do things, forcing a person in a relationship to stay with us, and manipulating. And really what I'm describing is domestic violence of force, as opposed to seeing kiss, learning to negotiate, learning to care for other individuals. So really sort of this is an image of sacred wisdom, and the circle represents the individual. And there are 4 components of that of all human beings. The spiritual, and what I mean by spiritual is that acknowledgement and relationship. There's a bigger universe. We're not the center of the world. We're not the center of the universe as individuals. We are part of something greater. Our planets move in a particular way. We have constellations during certain times of the year: fall, winter, spring, and summer. But it's really sort of that when I talk about, light and warmth, I'm referring to the sacred. I'm referring to the connection to love. And really sort of these philosophies and these belief systems are, again, as the image I showed before, are connections to that perfection, that of the holy ones. Whatever holy ones means to you as individuals. It might be a more Christian concept. It might be a more Buddhist concept. But the fact of the matter is, there is a philosophy, a belief system that I refer to and will include as sacred wisdom. But this, for me, is really Hajon, how everything sort of connects. So that circle represents the individual. But really what I'm talking about with connecting to the light and the warmth is what I also see as hope. So that when I have that, when I'm connected with it, it's now my responsibility to share it, as I'm showing as the arrow runs through from the universe, through the individual and grounds that individual through behavior, through action, to earth, to changing woman, to our mother. And so that's really sort of the essence of belief and what belief does as far as hope and sharing of that love. And the four triangles outside the circle represent the four sacred mountains of Dene, but they also represent the four cardinal directions. But my point is, we're related to our environment, our physical environment, our social environment, and there's a sacredness to this relationship. We should take care of that. Our existence doesn't end with our skin. Our existence moves out into the sacred of the environment, and that applies to physical and social environments. In other words, if we're in a toxic place, we should either tap into this or move out of that toxic place. Physically toxic, but also socially toxic. To move away from people that are full of angst, full of anger, full of opa. We know these situations, and sometimes we're not empowered to move away. Maybe we're in a bad relationship, we're in a bad marriage, we're in a bad situation where it's not so easy to just pick up and leave, that because of finances, because of other issues, and maybe even addiction. We're addicted to that, whatever it is that person provides for us. So we can't move away from it. So again, I want to provide just a perspective and outlook, and maybe even a point of intervention, or even to take it even to a step further, to teach our children to not become addicted to these type of toxic situations, physically toxic, socially toxic. I mean, it's almost equivalent to continuing to drink contaminated water, contaminate with radiation, contaminate with gas and oil. We continue to drink that water, and it has an impact on our body. But the social environment, the social toxicity also begins to erode what we believe in, the goodness, the love, the peace. We begin to get angry. So this is, again, that, I teach a class at the University of Arizona, and we spend about 3 weeks really looking at how this applies to individuals. We don't have enough time. I've only got like an hour and I need to move forward, but this is really what it's that interrelationship of the universe and earth, but also our environments, our physical and our social environments. What the Dene referred to as Inya, it's all together. There isn't a spiritual individual or a spiritual component. It's Inya. It's all connected. It's all, and this is the way that, it has guided my place in research. It has guided also my place in terms of teaching and what I refer to as psychosocial health. So I don't want to, there's much more to talk about, but I want to kind of get through how this affects our brain, and how it affects our health and wellness. But just kind of looking at hope. I mentioned that earlier. I don't mean just, man, I hope it happens. I mean, like, really connecting with this love, so that I'm responsible of carrying forward this universal energy, this, the yin, the net. This is my responsibility to carry out, to make things better for not only my children, not only my home, but for also those that are in need. I believe that, and I act. I try to act on that. That's just and I'm not the only one. I'm not saying that this is just as something I choose to do, but it's also, I've seen this in others. My uncle, the code talker, Frank Torricini, as I mentioned earlier, and also what my Shamasana, she talked about this natural order of balance, of what we refer to as homeostasis in biology. This level of whenever we get too much of something, we have systems to bring that back down. But sometimes when we're not aware of it, especially with stress, too much stress changes the body and affects our health, and also becomes habitual. Becomes a point of habit. So mind and body becomes very important. What we think about affects can either be detrimental or it can help heal our body. Just as the same as our body can also. When we get into sweat lodge, there's a psychology, a belief system, but there's also something that happens. So, I was part of a clinical trial that looked at hyperthermia, the use of hyperthermia. It's just another word for heat. The use of heat to treat major depressive disorder. It was effective, significantly effective. We were published in the journal, JAMA, the Journal of American Medical Association Psychiatry. And so that's if you Google that, you would Google hyperthermia, University of Arizona, you would find that study. But this is not a study about sweat lodge. All I'm saying is that there's an impact that heat has on serotonin pathways. Serotonin is a neurotransmitter that's associated with feeling good. So that's how the body can also affect the mind. If I'm feeling good, I'm going to act on that. I'm happy, I'm joyful. So it works both ways. So I just want to kind of just briefly discuss the impact of hope. But as I mentioned, this is really sort of that natural order that the black and the white come together. It's not always white, it's not always black, and so we need our responsibilities in taking care of ourselves is to, when it gets, as we begin to, we have moments of darkness, I always kind of see that as the fire in the center of the Hogan, this is really sort of that fire that I'm referring to in the middle. It keeps the place warm. It keeps the structure warm. But sometimes that fire starts to go out. And really what that fire represents is motivation. We have to feed the fire. We have to put more wood in there so we continue to have that. So this is really part of self-care, self-regulation. When we get too angry, when we get too sad, too depressed, I need to feed the fire. We need to take action so that we begin to seek a balance. So that's really sort of our responsibilities, utilizing this concept of natural order, utilizing this concept of sacred wisdom. It's not just thinking, it's allowing the energy to enter us so we take action. And it's in the action that we begin to resolve our issues. So we move from hopelessness into hope. And again, I don't have a whole lot of time to really get into that, but I just want to put that thought out there. And so, as far as I'm concerned, personally, the light and the warmth, the polar opposite of that, in terms of what we refer to as a paradox, is darkness and coldness, or really what sleep should be doing for us. Or the flip side of that is being awake, life and death. But from a more practical perspective, and again, we can all develop our own lists here. But for me, it's really sort of looking at the practical application of hyperthermia to treat major depressive disorder. But what we do in sweat lodge also has a healing quality that's also based upon a psychology, but yet there's a physiological outcome in terms of how we feel and we overcome major depressive disorder. And also the relationship of talking circle. And CBT is just a cognitive behavioral therapy, what some might refer to as talk therapy, where we sit with a therapist or an individual and we begin to work through why we do what we do. But for me, I'm a practitioner of talking circle. We bring out our eagle feather, we burn sage, but there's really a powerful event that happens because of empathy. And so we utilize talking circle again to when we hear about somebody else's problem. We have a tendency to connect with our own experiences, and pretty soon that comes out. This is what happened to me. And when we say that, and we let that ricocheting bullet, from inside of our hearts, inside of our minds, we let that out. When it's out there, then we can do something with it. Just as with cognitive behavioral therapy, the therapist might guide us into what is it we need to do to take care of whatever issue. With sleep, we might be doing something that allows us not to sleep, but because we're not sleeping, it's affecting our health. It's affecting our behavior. So I don't want to spend too much time with that, but this is what I'm talking about with natural order. You know, that homeostasis is really sort of balance. What comes up comes back down. So we really need to focus and tap into the parasympathetic nervous system, because the sympathetic nervous system is running amok, as I show right in the middle of this diagram. And that sympathetic nervous system is the fight or flight mechanism. So we need to really focus on what calms us down, on prayer, on meditation, on ceremony, on also letting go of these notions that we have to force our way, we have to fight, instead of carefully, calmly thinking through things. So there's not only psychology, what we believe, how we believe the world and the universe operates, but to take action on that. That's how we resolve our problems. It's not just thinking about it. This is an active process. Me as a Deneh man, utilizing it's up to me to make it happen. It's up to me to make the change. That's tapped into this belief system, this way of looking at life. So ultimately, when we talk about resilience, is that when we have a charge, we have this healing capacity. But what happens because we overload this process is we get stuck in either, hyper-arousal, hypervigilance, or, it's so depressing that we don't bounce out of that. We don't move ourselves. So I always kind of use this diagram to kind of guide me with connecting with the power of the light, with the power of warmth, in terms of, reassessing my responsibility. Like that fire in the middle of the hogan, it's my responsibility to put more wood in. So that's really, again, a reflection of self-help, of really sort of self-regulation. Self-regulation is another term for being aware of our emotions and taking the necessary action to bring us back to within that resilience zone, bring us back to some type of homeostasis. I'm severely running out of time. I want to just mention a little bit about historical trauma. I talked about this yesterday, community massacres, and, this becomes an intergenerational issue. And today we're seeing increase in interpersonal violence and childhood abuse and neglect, poor health because of inflammation and pro-inflammatory cytokines, but also psychiatric issues, substance abuse and addiction, self-medication ways, but also poor academic achievement. There's a part of the brain called the hippocampus, where short-term memory gets converted to long-term memory during sleep, during rest. But if our children are not sleeping because they're afraid or because they're being abused, then this process doesn't happen. And it really impacts academic achievement, which long-term, we don't have the necessary infrastructure. We don't have the attorneys, the lawyers to really define sovereignty. We don't have our healthcare workers. We don't have our own doctors. They come from the outside into practice, into doing the things that we understand what needs to be done. So that's how, again, when we talk about sovereignty, how poor academic achievement impacts that. And I won't go into stereotypes. I think you can go to a border town and even feel, so what that's all about. But, again, this is an augmentation of culture, and I'm running out of time. I want to just touch upon, what happens with the brain. But these are, again, I mentioned this yesterday in my talk on historical trauma and intergenerational trauma and how that affects individuals, so that we have, current or contemporary states, which again brings us to this wonderful opportunity, this conference here, to discuss and look at some of these issues. But the changes to the body that really, or changes to the brain that affect the body, affect behavior, and create these the current situations that we see. And I have to be honest with you, most times when I'm invited to talk about this, I'm given 3 or 4 hours, because there's some information here that's not just can be given in a 1 or 2 or 3 or a paragraph answer. There's some things that really we need to see the undertones of what that means. But I want to just kind of briefly talk about this diagram. What happens to children is that they don't trust adults that hurt them. So I'm using a spear. Some of you can see my picture, and pretty soon the child defends itself from the adults that hurt them. And pretty soon that becomes embedded into their personality, so that this is the way they act to everybody. And it may be hostile and negative. So everybody is treated this way, whether or not they're there to hurt them or not. But this really lends to other psychiatric and health issues. And I use natural order of coming up and coming down to chaos, hyperarousal, hypervigilance that eventually has the potential to lead to agitation, anger, self-medication, eventually death, addiction, and prison. So I just kind of want to just mention that. But ultimately, some of you have seen this, of how adverse childhood experiences eventually, the bottom line is eventually, lends to early death. But the basis of change is really sort of unlearning those responses of the child that's using the spear. That it's associated with, again, the childhood that we come from. And this is sort of the 4 areas of the brain that I really focus on when we talk about behavioral modification. And it's the prefrontal cortex is really sort of what we've referred to as executive functioning. We think about things, but our limbic system is really what helps us, becomes activated by fear, by stress, by recognizing. If we have, a post-traumatic stress disorder is really a memory issue. Something hurt us, and it stays in our memory because we don't want to get hurt again. We want to live, we want to survive. But we might get a sensation, something we hear, something we taste or see, that all of a sudden activates that memory of trauma. Our body relives that trauma all over again. And I just want to mention again that basal ganglia, that autopilot. We do things enough times. If I shoot 1,000 free throws, it becomes so much a part of me that I don't even have to look at the goal anymore, because my muscles are toned to the weight of the basketball and the distance to the goal. So that's how we begin to change. Is we need to realize that our habits, we can change our habits through being more mindful, through synchese. And so the brainstem is that autonomic nervous system, that point of fight or flight, but it's really sort of that autonomic rhymes with automatic system. And this is just shows you how specialized the areas of the brain is. And this really, I want to kind of just get to how the brain develops with number 1, the brainstem, which is really a foundation. The metaphor I use is building a house. We got to put the foundation on, but the walls are built on that, and eventually the roof or the outside, what we call the neocortex on top of that. So if we have interruptions in the way the house comes together, or if we have interruptions because of stress in terms of how the brain comes together, the brain might not come together the way it needs to, which will affect our health, which will affect also our behaviors. And this, kind of that fight or flight mechanism of how we get excited to either run or to fight. And really sort of what we need to focus on is really sort of that healing quality of parasympathetic nervous system, of prayer, of ceremony, of hajon and hajonche. So I want to just leave you with that. This is that clinical trial that I talked about, major depressive disorder, that really sort of, this is the paper that was published because of that. I apologize, I only have like 2 minutes for questions, but I'm going to leave my presentation here. My email address, if you have questions or, want to explore different areas, I'm wide open to your suggestions or to your questions. Just send me an email message. Thank you all. Have a wonderful day.